Hi everyone, meteorologist Steve Caparata here, back with another episode of Coast and Climate. You may have heard a while ago some talk about the radar in Slidell, the National Weather Service radar, being moved a little bit closer to Baton Rouge. Now, the original timeline had that done about now, late 2022. There have been some delays, and this is an important issue for our part of the world. So I wanted to bring in somebody to tell us more about what's going on with that. So to tell us more on an update on the radar, I've got Lauren Nash. She's the Warning Coordination Meteorologist at the National Weather Service New Orleans, Baton Rouge office in Slidell, three cities. First off, Lauren, good morning.
Hey, good morning to you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So give us an update on where we stand with this radar move. Is it still happening, I guess, is the first question everybody's asking?
Yeah, as you said, the original timeline was supposed to be this December, and we learned about a month ago that actually is going to get delayed. There were some issues actually above the NOAA level, above the Department of Commerce level, that we just need to figure out. But absolutely still moving. The money is there. The people are there. Everything is ready to go as soon as we get the approval.
Yeah, not a simple process, right? So I'm glad you pointed out this is a little bit higher up in terms of some of the delays, what's happening. Tell us a little bit about how long the radar is actually going to be down once this move actually happens. And with that in mind, what is the backup plan? Because we need that radar coverage.
Yeah, it's always tough when we have a radar that goes down, and it happens, sometimes across the Weather Service. So when it goes down, it'd probably be down for about 3 months. We hope it's not down too much longer than that. We do have neighboring radars. So we have Mobile, we have Jackson, Mississippi, Fort Polk, Lake Charles, and then we also have satellite. Over the years, we've launched a few new satellites, and those have given us high resolution data and just really better data to see some of the developing storms. And then otherwise, we're going to really have to rely on people on the ground telling us what's going on. We're not going to see as well into the atmosphere. So we're going to need many more reports on if you see rotation, if you see funnel clouds, strong thunderstorms, so we can have a better gauge of what's going on without that radar. We are trained on what to do when that radar is down, and there's plenty of places in the National Weather Service, such as the West Coast, that really has very little radar coverage. So definitely lean on some of the training that they've created and some of their experience.
Yeah, so it sounds like even the public has a chance to kind of help out when we do hit this downtime. Talk a little bit about, tell us why this move is happening and why it's important.
We'll start with what's important about it. The radar is our primary tool to look at severe weather, so especially tornadic activity. We know tornadoes form at the ground. They form pretty low, less than maybe 500 to 1,000 meters, a couple 100,000 feet. And the best way to see that is the radar. So because of the curve of the Earth, when the radar shoots its beam out to sample the atmosphere, it gets higher and higher and higher. So near Slidell, that beam is reading about 500 feet into the atmosphere. As we get closer to Baton Rouge, it's reading about 6,000 feet in the atmosphere. And as you can imagine, as we get to Terrebonne Parish or up in Wilkinson County, Mississippi, it's a little higher. So we had realized over the years that if we are able to move that radar a little farther west, we can get better coverage for most of our area. And on top of that, we're actually going to move the radar down a little bit. So it's going to sample a little lower in the atmosphere. So even with that westward move, areas in Slidell and New Orleans and the Mississippi coast are not going to see any changes in their radar coverage. So it's essentially a win-win for everyone to move it west.
Yeah, you hit on a couple of good things there. Number one, I'm not sure how many people realize how large of an area your office covers. So from the Atchafalaya Basin down to the coast, places like Grand Isle, into southwest Mississippi, and all the way over to the Mississippi-Alabama border. It's a pretty big area. So there's a lot of juggling to be done and figuring out kind of that sweet spot for the radar when we do only have one. You mentioned too that lowering the lower tilt. So right now, as it stands, most of the National Weather Service radars, the lowest tilt they'll operate at is a ½ degree above zero, right? A ½ degree above, looking straight out. So we're going to be bringing that lowest tilt down a little more once the move happens, right?
Yeah, so that tilt will come down to 0.3, which doesn't seem like a huge difference, but as that beam, gets higher and higher as it goes out with distance, that 0.3 versus 0.5, could have a pretty big distance, at 1 to 2,000 feet in some areas. So that is going to be a huge benefit for most of our area.
And you mentioned some of the numbers. So right now, the radar beam averaging somewhere a mile or more above Baton Rouge by the time it gets here. I made a graphic back when the announcement was first made about the move, and I know you guys made a graphic too, but basically to put this in perspective for everybody, once the radar move happens, the beam will be seeing maybe just above the top of the state capitol here in Baton Rouge instead of a mile up in the sky. That's a huge difference. So another question I've been asked, Lauren, and I want you to address this. I try to address it periodically, but let me let you as the expert answer this. So people say to me, why can't we just keep the radar where it is in Slidell and get another one and put it here in Baton Rouge? What's the issue with feasibility on something like that?
I can tell you from a meteorologist, we would love it. If we could have a radar in every city, every 60 miles, that would be amazing. Unfortunately, I think one of the biggest problems is money. We people sometimes think the government has all this money to use, but we don't. We have to pay to build the radar. We have to pay for the lease or buy the land that it's on. And then a lot of people, they don't realize is also the maintenance. There's the first fee, which is, millions of dollars to build this. And then, tens of thousands of $100,000s every year to make sure it's up and running, make sure it's calibrated correctly. We may have to hire somebody to help do that. And then the time to get back and forth, to work on that radar. So outside of the money, on the other side, I don't want to say it's not needed because, like I say, as a meteorologist, I would love a radar everywhere. But when we move that to Hammond, like I said, we're going to see the exact same height everywhere else in our area that we had in Slidell. So it really just frankly doesn't make sense since, we're going to go ahead and see it. Like I said, if we could have one everywhere, it'd be cool, but with just money and time and, the science behind it, it's really just not necessary. We are trained in our radar training, when we have radars that we see at 5,000 to 6,000 feet, what to look at 5,000 to 6,000 feet. So, we would normally look at, this threshold, at 500 feet, we'd look at this threshold at 6,000 feet. So we'll do just fine, with the radar moving.
Yeah, so let me ask you one other question, and I think you hit on this a little bit, but do we have a timeline now, given the delays? It's not happening on the original schedule at this point. Do we know what the timeline is at this point, or are we kind of up in the air right now on when this is actually going to happen?
We've been told a year, and I think that's for two reasons. One, we'd love it to move as quickly as possible. So, if we go before a year, that'd be great. But we do have to think about here, we have really active weather year round. So we kind of have a November to December severe season, and then we have, a February to May. And then we also have tropical, that goes till November. So moving the radar in December, while we do kind of miss one of our secondary severes, it's really the ideal time to have a radar down. So they told us a year. I think some of that, though, is also to keep it moving in that December, January timeframe. We'll have to see if they let us go earlier, if we choose to go earlier in the summer, or if we want to take it down during tropical season. We'd prefer to take it down during our quieter season. So it looks like right now, probably December 2023 is the time frame. I would say I don't see that getting backed up anymore, but I don't want to eat my words again.
No, look, we all know how those things go, and I understand what you're talking about there. But, you know, it is important to talk about getting this done, but also the fact that we really don't have a downtime in this part of the world. You know, one of the things I talk to people about here in Baton Rouge, there's no month where we average less than 4 inches of rain. We average a thunderstorm once every 5 days. So we are a busy part of the world, and it's kind of difficult to find that good time. There probably is no ideal time to move it. Let me transition a little bit from the radar talk now. As you know, very well know, doing what you do, in the headlines over the last week or so, Hurricane Ian, that's been a huge story here. We now know it looks like this may very well end up being the deadliest hurricane in Florida in almost 90 years. Go back to what's known as the Labor Day hurricane in 1935. They came across the Keys and several hundred people were killed in that one. So there's a lot of discussion in the meteorological community amongst emergency managers on what went wrong with the storm. Why are we talking about the number of fatalities that we are? From where you sit, a big part of your job is that messaging when it comes to warnings and severe weather and tropical threats. Are there any specific observations you've made with Ian that you think may have led to some of the issues we've seen?
Yeah, first of all, I don't want to, speculate on, all the deaths or the decisions that, partners made or officials made. I will talk about one thing that seems to have really stood out with Ian, that stands out with us all the time, is the forecast cone. Unfortunately, with the availability of weather models and spaghetti models out on the internet, people are getting confused or they're misinterpreting the different models and the cone. I have heard a couple quotes from Ian where they say, well, I was on the edge of the cone, or, the cone shifted to the east. Just talking about Fort Myers and Fort Myers only, they were in the cone the entire time. And, as we talk about, the cone only means that the center of the storm will make landfall in the cone 67% of the time. So 1/3 of the time, that center can go outside the cone, as well as the fact it does not have anything to do with impacts. So even if the center was going to Tampa, for example, Southern Florida is still going to have surge. And then on top of that, I've also heard people that have gotten a hold of the weather models and they've gotten a hold of the spaghetti models. And if 5 of the lines are going into Fort Myers, but 3 of the lines are going into Tallahassee, they took that and said, we're fine. And then they didn't look at the forecast again. So it comes down to a lot of that availability of the cone and the models and always watching the forecast. You can't look at it 5 days out and say, I'm good. You have to keep an eye out. And I just want to say one more thing. As we've seen this in our field a lot over the last week. Make a plan. Have a hurricane kit. I saw quite a few people say they didn't have time to plan. They didn't have time to get their things together. Ideally do that June 1st, know where you're going to evacuate if you need to, have things to help you if you have to go into your attic, have a kit ready. So, as we go through hurricane season next year, just some things to think about when it comes to planning.
No, I think those are some great points, and I'm not asking you to take an opinion, but a lot of people in the meteorological community are kind of wanting to do away with the cone, which I don't think personally is the answer. I think you kind of hit on part of the issue there. The cat's out of the bag. The information is there for anyone and everyone to absorb as much as they want. And so I think it's more about us on the meteorological side, the emergency managers and local officials, making sure we communicate that better and telling people to be careful with their own interpretation of things. But I'm not a fan of getting rid of the cone. A couple other things I note, Lauren. Number one, we've had 7 major hurricanes hit the continental U.S. Just since 2017. Been a remarkably active stretch. We all know that. But as I was looking at it, Ian has really made landfall in one of the more populated areas compared to those other storms. I think we're a little bit fortunate with the storm surge issue with some of the past storms because they haven't hit big population centers. Ian was a little bit different on that front. And then you get into emergency managers, local officials, it sounds like had plans in Fort Myers for evacuations and then didn't even follow their own plans they had on the books. So it's a complex issue, as I think you hit on. But ultimately, as you're right about, we've all got to have our plan, know what we need to do when there's a threat here, and make sure you understand how to interpret that information. All right, before I let you go, a couple of more questions for you. Number one, so periodically you guys do Skywarn spotter training where sort of the general public can learn a bit more about weather and actually learn how to spot severe weather and relay some of that to the National Weather Service. Do we have anything coming up soon, or is that maybe down the line a little bit in terms of those spotter training classes?
Yeah, we just recently, the last couple of weeks, I've been discussing with my team. We are going to start getting out and doing public spotter talks again, which will be the first time since 2019. We're really excited about that. Like you said, they're a way to meet us, talk to us, learn a little bit about weather, learn a little bit about safety, about spotting, how to contact us. So we're really excited about it. We are going to plan to spread our spotter talks out over the next year. We're trying to maybe do about 10, and that's between, like you said, Iberville Parish to Pike County, Mississippi, to Jackson County, Mississippi, down to Terrebonne, Lafourche. So we cover a really big area. So right now we don't have anything actually scheduled. We're in the process of contacting, looking for areas, looking for spots to do it. We will share it on our social media. We will share it on our homepage, and then hopefully, all of our broadcast meteorologists and our emergency managers will also share that. So just keep an eye out on all of our channels. You can always email us. You can always tweet at us, and we'll be happy to answer. But we are excited to see everybody again and talk to you all again.
We know there are a lot of weather enthusiasts in our part of the world, so when those come about, a great opportunity to learn and get involved. I'll be sure to relay that information once you guys do have some stuff scheduled. One last thing that I think is kind of neat, I'm going to pull up your website. So for people that aren't familiar, it's weather.gov/LIX is the website. If you go to the website, they've got some headlines at the top right now. One of those is this tropical cyclone dashboard. So we'll go ahead and open that one up and let people get a look at that. And Lauren, as I open that up, tell us a little bit about what this is. A lot of lines and dots on there as I first open it up.
I was going to say that, that'll definitely freak somebody out who's never been in this area before. So yeah, one of our new employees created this dashboard where it basically found any track that has impacted our area. I think he did with about 100 miles. I think he had to expand it a little bit to catch some of the impacts. Sometimes we get a storm that hits Texas, but we'll get impacts, surge. So he, took an area here and basically plotted all the storms that have impacted us. And I believe the dots are where the Hurricane Center puts points at along their track. And you're also able to sort. You can see on the left here, you can sort by year, you can sort by month, you can sort by category, storm name. So you can see, how many storms have we had in May, in June, in July? What's the strongest storm we had? And I believe you can also probably select, per line and kind of get an idea of where it made landfall. So there you go. We've got there you go. You can click on it and have a little bit. And I think it goes back to like the mid 1800s. There's some more information on that page. So a really cool database if you need, want an idea of what's impacted the area, what's gotten close to where you live now, just to see how busy we are. It's a really cool database to share.
All right, yeah, great stuff there on your website. Again, that's weather.gov/LIX. So Lauren Nash, Warning Coordination Meteorologist at the National Weather Service, New Orleans, Baton Rouge office. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, so again, sounds like the radar move about a year or so off at this point. We'll certainly keep you updated on that, but as we got into, that is going to be a big deal, especially as it relates to those of us around Metro Baton Rouge. That's going to wrap up this week's episode. Coming up next week, I'm going to be joined by Dr. Clint Wilson. He's the director of the LSU Center for River Studies. Really neat facility. They've got a huge model of the Mississippi River, if you've never seen that, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And this year's been interesting. We've gone from lots of high water events in recent years to the Mississippi running unusually low. So we'll get into some of that as well, maybe even talk about the Amite River Basin. So be sure to check that out next Thursday at 10 o'clock. And you can always catch our episodes on our website, wafb.com, and on our YouTube channel as well.